Although it's not to everyone's taste, the slow burn approach to horror is an effective way of creating suspense and instilling a sense of inescapable terror upon viewers. As the term suggests, slow burn films really take their time in laying out their foundations before gradually escalating the sense of threat and winding the tension. A large part of what makes this subgenre work is the payoff in the final act after all of the careful build-up. However, sometimes the climax isn't worth the wait. While the film itself may not necessarily be bad, their unsatisfying endings nevertheless left us on a disappointingly sour note. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with What Culture here with 10 slow burn horror movies with an underwhelming payoff. Number 10, You Are Not My Mother. When Angela suddenly reappears after being missing for a few days, she acts like a completely different person on her return. Instead of being bedridden with depression, she's cheery and active. Her behaviour is so different that her teenage daughter, Shah, suspects that this isn't her mother. After witnessing some freakish behaviour from Angela, we learn that Shah was right all along. This Angela is a changeling, and the only way to get her real mother back is to expose the imposter to fire. It's during the final confrontation between Shah and the creature where the teenager sets it alight. Whether Angela is taken by a monster or changed by mental illness, You Are Not My Mother is about a girl who just wants her mother back. It's disappointing, then, that the finale fails to fully address this. Not only does Shah not get to express herself emotionally in this far too brief climax, but the script likewise forgets all about its mental health metaphor. After the monster is bested, the real Angela returns with her depression alleviated. This suggests that mental illness can easily be overcome, consequently trivializing the pair's emotional arc. Number 9, The Dead Center. The Dead Center begins with a fascinating mystery. A man who's been pronounced dead after a suicide attempt wakes up in a hospital morgue with no memory of who he is or what happened. Things only get stranger when other patients begin to die in mysterious circumstances, with the man believing something followed him back from the other side. Seeped in a claustrophobic atmosphere, the ensuing investigation reveals that a dark presence inhabits the patient. But before anything can be done to put a stop to the violence that's been plaguing the hospital, the man is released after remembering his identity. It's now down to his psychiatrist to stop him. However, it's only at this point where the film begins to find its feet and the tension begins to set in. But with only minutes left to go, there's not much this slow burn mystery could do to stick the landing. While the shift to gritty thriller is a refreshing change of pace, the film couldn't satisfyingly close this case. What we're left with is a cop-out twist in which the darkness is implied to have transferred to the psychiatrist, and that's neither scary nor interesting. Number 8, Matriarch. Starring Gemma Rooper as Laura, Disney Plus's horror Matriarch sees the protagonist visit her abusive mother, who she hasn't seen in 20 years. It becomes apparent that something isn't right within the village when she arrives. Many of the residents, including her mother, look like they haven't aged a day since she left. Even weirder, Laura notices a black goo leaking from herself and various villagers. As the plot progresses, Matriarch only gets more bizarre. Eventually, it enters the territory of black magic, where it's revealed that Laura was conceived by a godlike creature that now lives in her late father's greenhouse. This same being is responsible for gifting her mother with the life-giving black goo. As entertainingly wild as this flick gets, the atmosphere is spoiled by a chaotic final act that acts more like a prolonged exposition dump than fitting conclusion. Rather than the mystery slowly coming together, the answers are thrown at us all at once to jarring effect. The sheer insanity of the situation distracts from the broader themes of motherhood and trauma. Likewise, before we're able to digest anything we've just seen, an unnecessarily ambiguous ending succeeds in only further muddying the waters. Number 7, Rose, A Love Story. Set within the picturesque snow-covered forest on the outskirts of a quiet town, Rose, A Love Story sees love-struck couple Sam and Rose make a life for themselves in a remote cabin. But there's a darker reason for their isolation. Rose suffers from a mysterious disease, which means she can't be exposed to sunlight and needs a steady diet of blood to quell violent tendencies. Like its title suggests, Rose, A Love Story puts its focus on the relationship between the central couple. Thanks to the extraordinary lead performances, this is a tender and surprisingly moving tale of how far we'd go for the ones we love. But the threat of their discovery hangs over them like a shadow. It's only a matter of time until the inevitable happens, at which point the film enters horror territory. Though the vampiric carnage was foreshadowed throughout the script, this payoff felt more like it was added to satisfy genre fans rather than to serve the story the writer wanted to tell. While brief, the violence is so out of place it becomes comical. In this case, less would have been more. Number 6. The Cellar. After the Woods family move into their new home in Shudder horror The Cellar, their teenage daughter Ellie disappears in the cellar during a blackout. Understandably spooked by the mystery, her mother takes it upon herself to investigate the sinister secrets that are quite literally carved into the home. It transpires that the house's former occupant was an accomplished mathematician who succeeded in creating a mathematical formula that turned the cellar stairs into a stairway to hell when it was dark. However, just as the teenager found her way in, a demon found its way out. Alongside an anticlimactic monster reveal, the cellar's ending likewise suffers greatly from a twist that plays fast and loose with its own logic. After saving her family by trapping the demon back in the cellar, the mother opens the front door to reveal the whole house is now in hell. With only a cursory reference to the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment to account for why this happened, this final twist comes across as a last-minute addition rather than a thought-out plot point. Had the script spent more time exploring the implications of this theory, the finale could have caused existential chills instead of indifferent shrugs. Number 5. Mandrake. Set in a small community in Northern Ireland, Mandrake sees probation officer Kathy tasked with supervising notorious local criminal Mary after her release. The townsfolk, who've given her the nickname Bloody Mary, believe she's involved in witchcraft, and when 2 children go missing in the woods near her home, she becomes the prime suspect. Kathy initially champions Mary's innocence, but it's not long before she discovers the rumours are true when she's captured by the witch and forced to participate in a dark ritual. Things only worsen for Kathy when Mary takes her son with the intent to use him as her next sacrifice. It looks like the stage is being set for a grand finale in which everything is about to come to a head. Frustratingly though, this final plot beat doesn't go anywhere. The kidnapping is thwarted almost immediately and the credits roll soon after. What's more disappointing than being robbed of the climax is Mandrake simply doesn't go far enough with its themes of motherhood and mob mentality. When both these women's stories end, this Shudder horror doesn't have much to say and consequently fails to leave much of an impact. Number 4. Vivarium. Or Vivarium? I feel like this is a tomato-tomato situation. However you want to say it. Starring Imogen Poots and Jesse Eisenberg, Vivarium sees young couple Gemma and Tom search for their dream home together. Their search takes them to Yonder, a picturesque suburb where everything looks the same. But when they become trapped and forced to raise a child that's anything but human, their dream of starting a family descends into an inescapable nightmare. What follows is a suburban dystopia that plays out like an episode of Black Mirror. The child demonstrates increasingly strange behaviour, and the couple soon find themselves detesting each other and the child. While Vivarium's allegories are anything but subtle, it nevertheless presents its ideas within a captivating mystery that only grows more enticing as events progress. Viewers will be spending their time waiting for some sort of explanation for what's going on. However, nothing of the sort arrives. All we can derive is the couple are somehow being held prisoner in an impossible space by an unknown alien race. Though there's nothing wrong with ambiguity, Vivarium's plot revolves around the couple's search for answers, and when all we get is a nihilistic allegory of family life, the payoff is devoid of any deeper meaning beyond its obvious metaphors. Number 3. The Blair Witch Project. Though the Blair Witch Project's influence on the found footage genre shouldn't be underestimated, for all its witchy goings-on, the ending left a lot to be desired. Made on a shoestring budget, the plot saw a trio of student filmmakers venture into the Black Hills forest with the aim of making a documentary about the eponymous witch that's said to live there. During their expedition, the tension was derived from the unknown. It's left ambiguous whether the spooky encounters the trio have are caused by a witch or a cruel prank. Eventually, the group discovers an abandoned house where they hear the cries of their companion coming from somewhere inside. They're found standing facing the wall, but before we find out what's happening, the person holding the camera is attacked. At the time, a large part of the terror of this film came from audiences believing the footage was a part of a real-life missing person case. However, now that we know it's all a work of fiction, the ending is less frightening as it is bland. Though a creative exercise in filmmaking and marketing, the Blair Witch Project isn't exactly scary by today's standards. Number 2. His House. While fleeing their war-torn home in South Sudan, Bol and his wife tragically lose their daughter during the journey. They're given a run-down house to stay in when they arrive in England, but the couple aren't alone. The spirit of their daughter has followed them across the ocean. Director Remy Weeks cranks up the tension with a selection of expertly crafted sequences until Bol reaches his breaking point. It's here we're hit with the bombshell that the girl wasn't their daughter. She was a child they kidnapped to secure their escape. Moreover, it's a witch who's punishing them for their actions. With the stakes set at nerve-shredding levels, the final act of His House prepares us for the witch's long-awaited arrival. Given the quality of the scares and design of the spirits thus far, viewer expectations are rightfully high. But when the witch appears with a design that's forgettably generic, the immersion is broken just as quickly as Bol's wife slices its throat before the horror has a chance to recover. Despite an underwhelming climax, a bittersweet coda showing the couple are learning to live with the literal ghosts of their actions is enough to salvage this ending. Number 1. Oculus. Despite coming from the brilliant mind of Mike Flanagan, supernatural mirror chiller Oculus nevertheless managed to fall off the rails right at the very end. Told through 2 parallel timelines, the film follows siblings Kaylee and Tim as they struggle to come to terms with the death of their parents when they were children. Whereas Tim, who was sent to a psychiatric hospital after the tragedy, has come to believe that his parents' deaths was the result of years of resentment and neglect, Kaylee is adamant that their misfortune is the direct result of an antique mirror her father purchased. No matter how convinced Kaylee is of the mirror's supernatural powers, though, Flanagan always leaves enough room to doubt her recollections. Consequently, Oculus becomes an effective meditation on trauma. However, these ominous undertones are discarded as soon as this flick hits its climax, when Tim, having been deceived by the mirror, inadvertently kills Kaylee in the process. With the swing of the blade, any doubt that the mirror wasn't supernatural is gone, with all the nuanced, character-driven horror shattering along with it. Had this film stuck to its guns, Oculus could have been a familial tale as provocative as Flanagan's other works.